All right, happening right now this morning, there is a group camping outside of the state's Department of Labor office. Let's get over to Francesca this morning to tell us more about why these people would take these sort of steps at this office before the sun even comes up.
They're doing what they have to do. It's all in response to an unemployment protest, Aisha, and people are fighting for their benefits and their money. Now, this is a video right now from last night. You see it right there. People waiting inside of tents ahead of today's protest. And tomorrow, Georgia will end its federal unemployment assistance for people who lost their jobs during the pandemic. So what does this all mean? It means the extra $300 that people received in addition to the state unemployment benefit, that's all disappearing. It's all going away. So coming up in our next half hour, we are taking a deeper dive into the upcoming changes and its impact that it has on Georgians. Aisha.